Hello, welcome to Algorithmz. My name is Saurabh, and today we are going to discuss about implementing a secure remote administration capability for an internet accessible system hosted in Azure. And these recommendations and reference architecture is aligned with Australian Cybersecurity Center and Information Security Manual. As we know that administrative activities should be done from a secure device over a secure connection and should be backed by a strong authentication and authorization process. Now, secure remote administration ensures that only authorized actions are performed and only by authorized administrators. Now, from the Australian Cybersecurity Center requirements perspective, this comes under ACSC Protect, which is secure administration, and under that there are certain guidelines, there are certain elements which has to be fulfilled, like privileged access control, multi-factor authentication, privileged workstation. Privileged workstation actually is the use of a known secure environment for administrative task for a lesser risk for your network to be compromised due to the implementation of additional security controls. Logging and auditing, network segmentation and segregation, jump boxes. A jump box actually is a hardened remote access server commonly utilizing remote desktop services or secure shell software. So jump boxes act as a stepping point for administrators accessing critical systems with all administrative actions performed from the dedicated host. Now, from the architecture perspective, as I said, this architecture is aligned with the ACSC requirements. I explained the different elements of those requirements. Now, the solution contains four different components. One is secure devices and secure communication, strong authentication, and strong authorization. Now, from the component perspective, to achieve all the requirements, we have used privileged workstation, mobile device, Microsoft Intune, group policy, jump server, and the elements that we are accessing from this secure device solution and using these components is privileged workstation and jump boxes. For the secure communication, we are using Azure Portal, Azure VPN Gateway, remote desktop gateway, network security groups. This is addressing ACSC element, network segmentation and segregation. Strong authentication, we are using domain controller, Azure Active Directory, network policy server, Azure MFA for the multi-factor authentication. A strong authorization, we are using identity access management, privileged identity management, and conditional access, and it is addressing privileged access control requirement of the ACSC. Now, from the flow perspective, anybody who is administering systems deployed in Azure is divided into two distinct categories: administering the Azure configuration and administering Azure workloads deployed in Azure. So Azure configuration is conducted through Azure portal, and workload administration is completed through administrative mechanisms such as remote desktop protocol, secure cell, or pass capabilities using tools such as SQL Server Management Studio. Now, gaining access for administration is a multi-step process. It involves the components listed in the architecture and requires access to the Azure portal and Azure configuration before access can be made to Azure workloads. Now, Azure configuration and Azure access portal, there are different steps like privileged workstation sign in, Azure portal sign in, Azure MFA conditional access, privileged identity management, identity and access management. So let me explain one of the things. So for instance, conditional access policies check the authentication attempt to ensure that it meets the necessary requirements such as IP address, the connection is coming from group membership for the privileged account, and the management and compliance status of the privileged workstation as reported by Intune. Now, MFA multi-factor authentication, I guess those who are using phone, they must have seen this feature many times. Identity and access management. Once privileged account has been securely identified and roles activated, after that administrator is provided access to Azure subscriptions and resources that they have been assigned permissions to through identity and access management. Azure workload administration. So this is also just-in-time access. We Azure VPN gateway, RD gateway, which is remote desktop gateway, network policy server, Azure MFA, and Jump server. So just-in-time access is to obtain access to virtual machines. The administrator uses just-in-time to request to RDP to the Jump server from the RDP gateway IP address, and RDP or SSH from the Jump server to the relevant workload machines. Now, from the network policy server, the NPS receives authentication request from remote desktop gateway and validates the username and password against Active Directory before sending a request to Azure Active Directory to trigger an Azure MFA authentication request. As you can see, means it is very clear that how we are meeting all the requirements from ACSC, and we have fulfilled the Azure configuration portal access and Azure workload administration access by explaining these different components. Now Jump server, once successfully authenticated, the RDP connection is encrypted using TLS, transport layer security, and then sent through the encrypted IPsec tunnel to Azure VPN gateway through the RD gateway and on to the Jump server. Okay, so from the Jump server, the administrator can now RDP or SSH to workload machines as specified in JIT request. So this is how you set up. This is a reference architecture, pretty easy, based upon your industry vertical and your requirement. You can just take this whole architecture, fine tune it, and go ahead and implement it. As I said, all the components are explained, different connections and how to set up, that you can find on the Microsoft website as well. If you look at the configuration, how to configure Azure portal, how to configure MFA, all those things are pretty easy to do nowadays, especially in the cloud environment. I guess this is it from my side. Thank you very much.